Diane powerful hook, for US audience. Everyone in the room thought she was the weakest recruit in the entire buzzy quiet, small, and barely noticeable. But when the general struck her in front of hundreds of soldiers, something happened that absolutely no Onia expected. 5 seconds later, that same feared general was screaming for help. A broken bar and the entire mess hall fell silent. Which part of the country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. General Rohan Briggs was a man whose presence alone could freeze a room. His boots echoed authority, his medals glimmered intimidation, and his reputation for crushing insubordination was legendary. Soldiers said he could break a recruit in under a minute. How faster if he was in a bad mood. On the morning that would later become the most whispered story on base, the dining hall was packed with trainees sitting shoulder to shoulder, trays clattering, conversations low, everyone trying their best not to attract the infamous general's attention. But sitting near the center of the hall was a girl who always stood out for the wrong reasons. Lily Hart. At 19, she was the youngest recruit in the entire program. Small, soft-spoken, and with a frame that looked more suited for a library than a battlefield, she was the favorite target for jokes, doubts, and whispered bets about how quickly she would wash out. General Briggs noticed her the moment he stepped inside. His eyes narrowed with annoyance. "There she is," he muttered under his breath, marching straight toward her. The soldiers sitting nearby stiffened, recognizing the storm headed their way. Lily sat upright, silently eating her breakfast, unreal or unconcerned that the general was zeroing in on her. But the room went dead quiet as his shadow fell across her tray. "You," he barked, pointing at her forehead with the same authority he used in combat briefings. "Stand." Lily didn't move. Not out of disrespect, but because she followed orders from her direct trainer, not a random command thrown at her across the room. This only enraged Briggs further. With a swift step, he leaned forward and pressed his palm onto her forehead, pushing her back slightly. A more humiliation than harm. Gasps rippled through the hall. No one dared intervene. "Look at you," he hissed. "Barely strong enough to lift a rifle. What mistake brought you into my unit?" Lily closed her eyes, breathing slowly, as though centering herself. The general misinterpreted it as defiance. He pressed harder. "Weak girl," he said with a sneer, "you don't belong here." A few soldiers looked at each other nervously. Something felt off, and not with the general, but with her. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't shrinking. She was a broken bar, calm. Too calm. Those who had been around long enough recognized that calm meant not peace, but preparation. And then it happened. In a motion so fast that half the room didn't even understand what they had seen, Lily's hand shot up, grabbed his wrist, twisted it backward at an impossible angle, and locked it against her shoulder. The general's face transformed instantly. A shock, confusion, and then a flash of raw pain. A yell erupted from his throat, echoing off the stainless steel walls. It wasn't a command. It wasn't a shout of anger. It was the sound of a man who had lost total control. Chairs screeched as soldiers jumped back. Officers froze mid-step. In 5 seconds exactly, General Briggs, the man who had terrified generations of soldiers, was on his knees, his arm immobilized by a girl half his size. "Stop, stop," he cried out, desperately taping the table. Lily released him instantly, stepping back with perfect discipline, breathing steady like she had simply completed a training drill. Briggs scrambled away, grabbing his arm, face pale with humiliation. "Whoa, broken bar, who trained you?" he gasped, staring at her with disbelief and fear. Captain Torres, who had been watching from across the hall, finally approached. "Sir," he said carefully, "her file is restricted for a reason." The general's eyes widened. Restricted files were extremely rare, usually reserved for classified units, covert operations, and individuals trained under programs the public never heard about. Torres lowered his voice. "She's not here because she's weak. She's here because she's too strong for the program she came from." The murmur that passed through the room was almost electric. Lily stood in silence, expression unchanged, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Briggs, breathing hard, wiped the sweat from his forehead. His pride, not his wrist, seemed to hurt the most. "Why wasn't I told?" he growled. Torres looked him directly in the eye. "Need to know clearance," sir. And you didn't need to know." A wave of embarrassment flushed the general's face. He glanced around the hall and saw dozens of soldiers staring and not at him, but at her with or replacing ridicule. Lily finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Sir, strength isn't something you see, it's something you respect." And with that, she quietly returned to her seat, lifted her spoon, and continued eating. The entire dining hall remained frozen, no one daring to even exhale too loudly. What had just happened would be whispered across the base for months. How a weak girl dropped a legendary general in less than 5 seconds, and how true power doesn't always arrive in the form you expect. Powerful military stories.